We are good to
All
begin
right.
when you are, Worship.
Thank you very much. I'd say welcome everybody to the Council of the Township of Georgian Bay for Tuesday, October 12th. I'd like to call this meeting in order at 9:06, and I apologize to everybody for the delay in the start due to some circumstances that I will take the blame for, trying to get myself organized this morning with a couple changes. I would like to start as usual with reconciliation. Let's see, in the spirit of reconciliation, we wish to acknowledge the enduring relationship between Indigenous peoples and the territories they traditionally occupied. We recognize and deeply appreciate the historic connection they have had to this place, the land, the water, the sky, and all that live on, in, and above it. We are grateful for the opportunity to meet here, and we thank all the generations of Indigenous people who have taken care of this place and to continue to care for it. And we want to show our respect. Hundreds of years after the first treaties were signed, they remain relevant today. May they guide our decisions and our actions. We commit to learn, to educate, to honor sacred places, and to take actions towards real truth and reconciliation. And I just want to add a little story to this, if I may, this morning. Last week, I was talking to a neighbor of mine, and some trees had to be cut down, new septic system going in. And one of the individuals as part of that conversation was a tree elder. And just the whole tone that she took towards it was so refreshing and enlightening. She made an offering of tobacco and, apologized to the trees and promised them that they would be replaced. And I just thought that that's something we have to keep in mind as we go through, is that have this sort of long-term perspective and respect and appreciation for everything, nature, people, everything around us. So now down to our more serious business. Declaration of pecuniary interest or code of conduct conflicts. Any declarations from any of you? All right. If anything comes up during our discussions, please let us know. We had on our agenda a delegation, but I see that it's now been withdrawn. And the consent agenda, I am going to propose that we postpone that until later today, because a couple of the items had not been posted with enough time for everybody to review. And with that, I am going to go past a few pages here, and I have a resolution moved by Councillor Bochuk, seconded by Councillor Cooper. Be it resolved that Council adopts the, whoops, wrong one. I apologize. I have to go down a few more pages. And you'd think my delay in starting this meeting meant I would be a little more organized. Here we go. Be it resolved that Council adopts the regular agenda of October 12th, 2021 as circulated. Again, moved by Councillor Bochuk, seconded by Councillor Cooper. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. All right. Communications. Why don't we break total pattern? And I'll start this time. A couple of you have complained in the past that why am I always last? Why don't I go first this time, just for a break? I've had a very, very busy month. It started quite pleasurably with the Segbay golf tournament that took place between our two council meetings of last month, in which I had the pleasure of joining Sarah Reimer as she raced around the course a couple of times, taking pictures of everyone. So it was I quite enjoyed that. That was followed a couple of days later by the filming day with Our Lady Peace, which was really quite enjoyable and very interesting to watch all these professionals at work and how they do things. 2 days after that, the Georgian Bay Land Trust had their fundraising walk for wilderness. This time it was up actually on Rose Island, which is a little west of Parry Sound. On the 22nd, did an Indigenous training program offered by the Friendship Centers of the province. And I found that very interesting. Ms. Dunby had joined me with that. And one of the points that they wanted to make, which I thought was quite interesting, and it is relevant to our area here, is that they believe over 80% of Indigenous people do not live on reserves, as the traditional name is, but rather in urban centers. And a fair portion of the Indigenous population don't identify as such for various historic reasons, many of them not positive. And I think, certainly I know in the Honey Harbor area, that's quite true. So I thought that it was very interesting training. That was followed by the I'll call it the Honeybee Festival Week, which included, I did the fun run, had being filmed by CTV, for instance, honey tasting with Councillor Jarvis and CEO Gunby. Unfortunately, Councillor Jarvis was wrong in one of his choices, but so be it. On the 30th, September 30th, went to both the Wata Mohawks and the Moose Deer Point First Nations to join them in their remembrances in regard to all the children that were lost in the residential schools and the long history of oppression that our Indigenous neighbors have suffered. October 2nd was, of course, the Honeybee Festival, which I found was great success in Honey Harbor. I'm going to estimate, and I haven't heard the final numbers, that we had probably 50% more people than we did 2 years ago in Honey Harbor in the area, and everybody I talked to seemed to be quite enjoying it. And I didn't get really any complaints, though I did get numerous suggestions on how to make it better next year. So I thought it was a very positive experience. And of course, that was followed in the evening by the virtual concert or couch party, if you prefer, and I think that went quite well. This past week, as most of you, the council knows, there was a joint council training session, with the various municipalities within the district of Muskoka, in regards to integrity commissioner area the study, and of course Thanksgiving. So that's my list for the past month. And let's start now with Councillor Bocek. We'll go in alphabetical order, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A busy month for me as well. I attended the district-wide council training session, which was hosted by our integrity commissioner and others. Found it to be very informative and well worth attending. I worked with Brad in our operations department and the district of Muskoka to get the repairs done to Honey Harbor Road that were well past due. Attended the Honeybee Festival, which was great. I met our mayor there, and my wife spent our whole month's savings on bee stuff, which was awesome. Attended the live taping of the Our Lady Peace concert, but not as a counselor, but as a guest of one of the major sponsors. Many hours, days, and even weeks now, speaking with residents on Little Lake about the floating barges with the sea cans on it that are creating such a problem. Basically gathering information, contacting agencies, and just trying to get some progress, some reports on progress. Attended the Seg Bay Golf Tournament, where I was very glad to see some other fellow counselors there. Steve, I hope you didn't hurt anybody, and glad to see you out for the tournament. And of course, we all had a house party and watched the Our Lady Peace video from the Delawana Inn in Honey Harbor, and it was very impressive, very well done. And I think all in all, great month, and kudos to everybody and all the volunteers from the Honeybee Festival. Fantastic event. Really look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Douglas.
Thank you. Well, it was a busy month for me, but in a different way. I spent a lot of time on various docks with constituents, which usually happens at this time of year as the fall moves in. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend a few of the things that I would have liked to. Still nursing a knee that's not cooperating with moving around too much. Other than that, just a lot of time spent talking with constituents about various items and trying to direct them with the right staff members to put them together. Of course, watching everything that was going on with the Honeybee Festival, I congratulate all of you that were able to attend and had a hand in putting that together. Well done, really well done. Other than that, that's it for me. Thank you.
You know, I realized that I just did this out of alphabetical order because the list I had here from last month didn't include Councillor Cooper. So Councillor Cooper, I know you correct me on my grammar. I think you're now going to have to correct me on my alphabet, but I'm going to give you next turn.
Thank you, Mayor. And yes, C does come before D, but that's okay. I can live with it. And I think I was here last month, but maybe I missed something. I was on another planet or something.
I think it just got missed on the list I was given.
Okay. In any event, like so many of you, a lot going on. Mostly not a lot of in-person things, but a few. But a lot of calls about a variety of different things, particularly concerns about certain septic systems and water quality issues. So I've been trying to deal with that. I had a few events that I attended, just going through the list here, including I attended a retirement party for an employee of the Georgian Bay Land Trust. I also had a lot of calls and activity associated with the education center concept, and so that's moving along quite nicely, I think, generally. And so that's I don't have a lot to report on that, other than we have been able to at least have a discussion with the Dr. Vranek, who was on the original team back in 2015, and they can do the feasibility study for us if we so choose to use them. And almost the same fee as 6 years ago, not 15,000, but 17,000 this time. So that's be great to get moving ahead with that. I think that's it for now for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hazelton.
Thank you. So for me, it was a very busy month. As many of you know, I chose to play a coordinating role, not township sponsored, for collecting names for a gypsy moth spraying program, just to get the attention of the spraying company, and that was very successful. And now the baton is basically handed off to that spraying company, and they are reaching out to individual member, property owners to get them to formally sign up. So I would say that was a reasonable success and service provided to my residents in the community. I've had many calls on planning and environmental matters, spanning all the way from the Honey Harbor area all the way up to Wawatasi. So that occupied a fair amount of time. And then from a meeting perspective, well, it wasn't really a meeting, but I did take advantage of the large item pickup at the town center in Honey Harbor, and met lots of other people who were doing the same. Attended the Honeybee Festival and wandered around, bought a few things, but didn't spend our month's savings. So I got away fairly scot-free, so to speak. We had library board meetings, Honey Harbor CAG meeting, the planning committee meeting, district training session, and the GBA's coastal advisory committee meeting. So it was a busy month for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
I think I'm sort of an amalgamation of everything else that's already been brought up between the training, library board. I did have SegBay. That'd be the only difference. They're trying to get better use now with with in-person meetings starting to pick up, but they want better use of the Brissette House. So there's some work going on there. But other than that, the council training, bee festival, honey tasting. I'm very happy to report that I did not drop any honey on the mayor's feet this time around. And the golf tournament was actually, I was very, very impressed with the organization of that golf tournament. And I'll aim my comments specifically at Mr. Councillor Bocek, because I know he's involved in that. It was a lovely day, so it worked out really well. As is the weather for the market day for the bee festival. We lucked out in that regard as well. I think that obviously shows that hold these things and the weather will come for us, I guess. So it's all good. Issues up and down the bay, like everybody else, with regards specifically, really, to septic setups and questions about them. That's committee of adjustment material, and of course, I did a committee of adjustment meeting as well. So I think that pretty much summarizes my month. But it was much like everybody else's. Definitely keeping a very close eye on that CCAN situation. I'm not has been reported and even written about by our mayor. I'm very, very concerned with that situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rienko, we'll save you for, is this the best for last?
W comes at the end of the list, so I'm used to that. A couple of things. No, it's been actually a quiet month. I took some time away from the township, and in doing so, I missed a couple of meetings. I missed a planning committee meeting and also an SSEA meeting. So that was disappointing, but they were pre-planned holidays, so it was a way. I did attend the golf tournament with a number of other people, and that was a lot of fun, and hopefully it'll continue. Beyond that, I just dealt with a few emails and phone calls concerning the floating cottage, container cottage in Go Home Bay. I mean, in Gloucester Pool, and a few road issues and a few water quality issues, but that was about it. So basically, it was a quiet month.
All right, thank you very much. CO Gunby, I think you have some stories to tell us and a bit of news.
I don't have very many stories to tell you, but first of all, other than in addition to everything all the members of council have stated, the Honeybee Festival was a huge success. I streamed the concert at my trailer park on the weekend, and we had about 30 people show up to watch it. So it was really successful, and it was a great event. And the weather was gorgeous, Councillor Jarvis. It was such a good day. And then I just want to introduce Christopher Espila, which I'm pretty sure I said his last name wrong, but he is our new director of planning, and he started this morning. So he's just here to say hello to you.
Well, good morning, Mayor and Council and the rest of the senior management team. Very close in the last name, Jessica. Espila, Asplate Grasp, Illa. Delighted to be here. My background's in long range planning. I really focus on the long term. Looking forward to working with the township on our wide variety of environmental issues. Sounds like we have some exciting times ahead of us. And over the next week or two, I look forward to scheduling some time to speak with each of you on an individual basis to learn more about your priorities, both for the short term and for the long term for the township, and get your individual senses of what the communities should look like. So anyway, I look forward to it. Glad to be here, and thanks for the introduction, everybody.
And welcome, Christopher.
Welcome aboard.
Definitely, on behalf of council, behalf of all our residents, welcome to the township. And I can tell you, Director Espila this morning, when almost as soon as you walked through the door, was hearing further about the container cottages situation, and I was quite impressed. The man has done a lot of homework the last few weeks in getting ready for this job, so I think he'll be ready for at least some of your queries and suggestions. So welcome aboard. Anything else, Ms. Gunby?
The only other thing I have to say is that we are currently seeking a legal opinion from Paula Lombardi regarding the C-cans. because no one seems to know who deals with them or does anything with them. So hopefully we can get something figured out. And so I can bring that to council when I do receive it.
Yeah, I think the good news is a lot of people are working on this. The bad news is the solution hasn't been found yet.
Correct.
All right, let's go on to our staff reports. And our first staff report is in regards to the financial service report on the insurance policy renewal and the bad news that entails. Ms. Boutiette, get us upset.
A good way to start a council morning. Thank you, Mayor Co-Chair, and happy to be with you guys, council. So this report is about our 2021-2022 insurance policy. We did receive about a 29.3% increase, totaling $83,000 increase from last year. The report is with you guys, and really just the policy has been renewed. It expired on September 30th. The mayor and clerk did sign the renewal. We were hoping to have a conversation at the committee of the whole with one option that we had to increase deductibles. I recommend against increasing that deductible because one and a half matter would not see any savings. So the resolution is before you, and the resolution also includes that we don't go to market again for the 2022 and 2023 year because we are in a hard market, and hard market is not recommended that you go search. The risks are higher than the rewards. You probably won't see savings. You'll probably see one bidder and potentially an increase in the bids. So best to work with the company that we are currently dealing with, which is BFL.
All right, I see Councilor Rienko's hand followed by Councilor Bochek, please.
I was just wondering, this 29%, is that typical across all the various municipalities, or are we a little higher than others, or maybe your opinion?
Yes, through your worship, we are on the high end. We did poll the Muskoka district municipalities. A lot of them are sitting around the 25-30%. There is one who is sitting around the 20%. It is unknown why they are sitting there. One of the biggest piece of our increase is actually cyber. Cyber has become a big risk, and we are working on mitigation factors. We hope that within the next renewal period that we are able to put in measures so that that number gets reduced, but it will not get reduced back to the rate that we had in prior years. So the risk is increased, but there's also things that we haven't done to protect ourselves in relation to cybersecurity. So we're working on those things. We have a lot of tools available to us right now. Council did commit also a lump sum of money to remediate some of those items. So we should see a decrease in cyber next year when all those things are in place, but not going to affect this 2021-2022 policy period.
Can I do a follow-up there?
Yes.
Is there a need for staff review of things that we can do over the next year or so to reduce future increases? As they say, one thing is to get a cyber security updated, or maybe increase our deductibles and so on. But is there a number of other things that we can do to potentially reduce our increases in future, and maybe have a report brought back to council?
Through your worship, the report, besides the option of the increased deductible and the multitude, I think there are 7 recommendations in terms of cyber. There were no other recommendation from the insurer or in terms of things that we could do to reduce our policy in future years.
All right, thank you. Councillor Bocheck, followed by Councillor Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is going to be directed at Julie. So you've been told that the reason for the increase in the premiums of 29% is purely based on our inability to have our data protected, cyber threats, and was there any mention to the number of incidents we had or the amount of claims that we had? Is that part of the reason for the increase as well too?
Through your worship, I didn't say that that was the only reason. I said that was the major reason for the increase. There are increases across the board, including liability, including property, including equipment breakdown. The cyber liability, there has been no claims. It's just an overall liability across municipalities. And the fact that we don't have all the tools implemented to mitigate those risks at the moment. I guess to follow up with things we could do, joint and several liability, which we've mentioned time and time again, is still a big factor, and that's something council can do to follow up with the province through resolutions, through conversations with their MPs on getting that piece of legislation changed so that we're not the capable payer of insurance claims, and therefore we should only be responsible for our actual responsibility, share of responsibility on a claim, and not up to 100% because we have the capacity to pay.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Obviously, lots of questions moving forward on this because a 29% increase just doesn't sound reasonable to me. And maybe we need to look at not changing companies. I'm not suggesting that, but I'm thinking maybe we need to look at why. And maybe I'll suggest that I'll bring a request for direction for staff to give us a report on what claims we have had that resulted in this increase, because if there's claims that can be avoided in the future, I think we need to look at that aggressively, because this is a lot of money. We have spent an absolute fortune on IT and upgrading our systems, our computer systems and that. And if we haven't got to a point where we are cyber safe, maybe we need to look at reallocating some of those funds from where they're going to this to get ourselves protected, because this just sounds outrageous. In dollar wise, so that everybody's aware, 29% of $100 is $29. That's not a big increase. What are we talking about in dollars for an increase over last year?
Through your worship, so as per page 3 of the report, there's a full detail there, and we're looking at $83,000, which is almost a potential 2% increase in taxes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Douglas and Councillor Jarvis, did I see your hand go up? And I believe I saw Councillor Hazelton and Councillor Cooper.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's quite, that's a very big increase in my opinion. Julie, I just have a couple of questions. Can you tell me what is the excess liability? Kind of curious. That's a 57% difference, and I'm wondering what is that? Can you just give me a rough breakdown of what that is?
Through your worship, I can definitely find out, but I don't have that information at the tip of my finger at the moment.
Okay, I think that's important we know because that's a 57% increase right there or difference.
Wouldn't that be for the umbrella policy? The umbrella
Because our
coverage?
general liability is in the first line. Therefore, I'm not sure what's in the excess liability.
I think normally it's like an umbrella policy that any claims that go above, say, 2 million or something, you have an umbrella policy, and I think that's probably what that's for.
Okay, that would be great if that was clarified. Also, I'm just looking for property and crime. Have we had a lot of property problems or crime problems with our properties, or is this just something standard across the board that's happening in insurance, or?
We did have one claim in 2021 on property. And we did also have one claim in automobile in 2021.
Okay. I think I'm on the same page as one of our other counselors just mentioned about just getting some sort of an idea of what all the claims are. Like, why are they at 29.38? And if other townships are lower, is it because they're with a different insurance company that's got a different kind of rate? Or is it because our claims are more, we have more claims? I'd just be interested in knowing why we're at the high end of this one, because this is quite high in my opinion. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Julie.
Thank you. And now I have Councillor Jarvis, followed by Councillor Hazelton, followed by Councillor Cooper.
I think we're just subject to an insurance organization right now that is just taking advantage of the situation and trying to actually cover their butts and a bunch of other stuff they've had to lay out money for with regards to COVID. So unfortunately, I think we're victims of a situation we don't have a lot of control over. And I appreciate everything that's been done. I appreciate again the numbers, and I don't like them either. I think it's absolutely horrendous, but I don't think we have an issue. Anything we can do about it. But I do have a question for Julie, and that is, I think this has been discussed. I think you may have provided an answer in the past. If you could refresh my memory, there is no way we can be umbrellaed under the district as a district-wide policy that would be advantageous to all the municipalities. Is there a way of doing that, or has that been looked at, or is there any way of looking at that?
Through your worship, there has been conversations at the treasurer's level about joining into one policy. The discussions are still very preliminary. We mentioned kind of first step would be kind of aligning all of our policy periods. Right now we're all over the calendar year. Some renew in June, some renew in the fall, some renew in the spring. So the very first step would be to align our policy period with stub periods. It is in very preliminary conversations. I personally believe that we would benefit of an overarching policy for the district and the district municipalities. To get there, I'm not sure if the treasurers will recommend that the councils put forward supporting resolutions. I will bring that back when there is more to do that. If council wishes to make that a priority for the treasurer group, you are more than welcome to put forward a resolution before we request one. And that would show your desire to move forward with that joint service.
Yeah, I think we might have a little bit more leverage with insurance companies as a larger entity, I guess is the way of putting it. Anyway, thank you very much, Julie.
Thank you. Councillor Hazelton, followed by Councillor Cooper.
Thank you. I just wanted to kind of reiterate, there was a comment about property and crime, and although Julie, you did say that cyber liability was a huge increase on $10,000 doesn't really add up to a huge problem. The problems seem to be in property and crime, and then the first two lines of liability, and perhaps liability is something we can't do anything about, but I can't imagine how we can go from $34,000 to almost $60,000 in property and crime when, I mean, if we'd had a real flurry of claims, I could see that, but with only one claim, I'd be pushing back on the insurance company really hard on that line item alone, which is the single largest increase in your chart, and say, this is unreasonable, it's unbelievable. You buy insurance to cover small losses. unless our loss was massive and we had lots of them, I can't imagine how anybody could justify raising that number. So I think that although we may have signed this thing, I am not pleased at all with these massive increases, and the insurance companies certainly they have us over a barrel on some items, but I can't imagine how that would be one of them. And the other item coming out of left field, marine liability. How is it that comes out of nowhere, zero cost, and it jumps up to $7,500? I mean, there's just so many questions on this that I think we need answers to, and I would certainly encourage those answers to be pursued aggressively with the insurance companies, and a report brought back to help us understand at least what the insurance companies are saying about it, because this doesn't make any sense at all. Thank you.
Through your worship, I think I have both of those answers on the property and on the marine. On the property, a shared reason why our property has increased so much, besides the one claim, is I did a thorough review of property values that were listed in our policy, and a lot of them had not been adjusted in a very long time. So all the property values were adjusted in line to match with our asset management plan that we've been undergoing. So there was a big increase in the value of the properties, like the replacement cost of the properties. So that provides some explanation on why the huge increase. And on the marine liability, we didn't have marine liability at all. And we were cautioned during the 2021 year that if we operate any kind of marine or docks of any kind, that we should be covered with a marine policy. It's not covered under our general liability policy. So we did an application, a separate application that our director of operations and myself worked on thoroughly to detail out what we have and what they're used for. And this is a new piece of insurance that we have, also that includes the Port of Honey Harbor that we didn't have before. This is a new asset to us.
So thank you for that. I think it would have been helpful, and perhaps you could provide this after the fact, but for example, what you just highlighted is we have very significant increases in value in property, and it would be useful to understand the value differences that would subsequently justify a premium increase. Similar with marine liability. I mean, basically, it in some respects, it looks like we're getting caught up for past missing or inaccurate information. And, for this kind of thing to be justified to our residents, I think we need a lot more information in a document of some kind that we can provide, so that we're not saying, well, I think this, or I think that, or I remember something about this. I think we need to have something that is in a shareable format that can help our residents understand what justifies this almost 30% change. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor Kutzir, and thank you, Julie, for the report. And I believe we discussed this last month as well. I just wanted to add a couple of things. First of all, I think what we noticed when you reported on this previously, and this time again, that of the, I think you found 6 comparators, or 5 or 6, I don't remember the exact number, but almost every one of them, with the exception of one, was up about the same amount. So we got to keep that in mind as well. We can rail away about the high cost of insurance, but I think everybody, with the exception of Muskoka Lakes, for whatever reason, are similar increases to ours. But and I've had some back and forth with you about this, and it would be really helpful at some point if we can find out what Muskoka Lakes is doing. And maybe they're doing some things that are not playing catch up, for example, like we are on property values or building values, I guess. I hope it's not property values. I hope it's building values. And so I wanted to comment on that. I also think it would be helpful when you're talking to the other treasurers to find out if it's the same carriers. Why don't we at least find out who's carrying whom, shall we say? Because if we're all in with the same carrier, there's a very simple solution to the sort of consolidation of policy for everyone. If you've got the same carrier, or you've got a fair number of municipalities that have the same carrier, that would help facilitate perhaps a sort of a broader coverage program. So there's one suggestion. And keep maybe digging with Muskoka Lakes and finding out what they did. Maybe they're doing something that we are missing, and if they are, it'd be interesting to know what it is. So those are a few of my comments on this very high increase. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Boutier.
Through your worship, if I may, it's a very good point you bring up, Councillor Cooper. We, in the last policy period, only went up 16%, while most of them also went up about 22 to 25%. So if we take the 2-year average, I would say we're all pretty equal. And again, 5 of the 6 district municipalities are all covered by BFL. So yes, you're absolutely right that consolidation or joining of a policy would be quote unquote simple. And also the District of Muskoka is with BFL as well.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Boutier. I'm quite pleased with your ability to answer most of these questions. I think a couple observations are important. One is, yes, our rates went up close to 30%, but I wouldn't be surprised if somewhere in the range of 7 to 10% of that, or a quarter to a third of it, is because of increased values. And I think it's wise to have insurance that actually covers our values as opposed to well below it, because all we need is one claim that falls short in values, and the premium has been more than lost. I also think it's worth noting that, as you pointed out earlier, different of our neighbors have different renewal dates. And, in this market, as things start to go bumping up, different people hit at different times. And it's not until you look at 2 or 3 years rates and how they've increased that you can see how well we compare to our neighbors. But I think you have this, notwithstanding the request for a little more information for council, you have this well in control, and I appreciate all your work on this. I have moved by Councillor Douglas, seconded by Councillor Hazelton. Be it resolved that council receive the insurance policy renewal for 2021-2022 report, and the council acknowledges that the 2021-2022 renewal was signed by the mayor and clerk to ensure continued coverage, and that the council agrees that staff will not be going to market for the 2022-2023 insurance coverage period, since it is not recommended to do so in a hard market, because alternatives for less expensive coverage from other providers is practically non-existent. Any further questions or discussion? Councillor Jarvis.
I appreciate the recommendation about not going back to market, but Julie, I presume we would just keep an eye on things anyway as a matter of good practice, right? So if something were to become available, are we locking ourselves into 2 years here, or? Okay, fine. Thank you.
Through your worship, the answer to that was no. And also, we attend risk management meetings quarterly with all the district municipalities. Our director of operations has started to attend those because a lot of the risk management is on the operations side. Therefore, we are doing everything in our power to show that we have will, want, and are capable of risk mitigation practices, so that our our insurer and our broker understand that, you know, we are doing everything we can to control the risks so that our premiums don't skyrocket.
All right, thank you. I will call for the vote. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much. All right. Next on our list, we go through operations for a number of reports. Director Socash, I believe the first thing you're going to talk to us about is Volks boat launch panels.
Thank you, Your Worship. Actually, the next three reports are all tenders that were recently closed. They've come in well over our budget. Prior to submitting them for the budget, we did either speak to contractors to get a budget number or looked at previous prices. But these three have come in so high, similar to other ones, that generally we're suggesting that they be deferred or put off for reconsideration next year. I know the earlier ones from previous council meetings, we suggested that additional funds be used for the purchase of whatever the material or equipment was, because there was more of a need there, whereas we feel that these are more along the lines of wants. And with the budget situation we've discussed over the last couple of meetings, the Director of Finance and I think it would be best to put these in for consideration in the 2022 budget. So the first one, as you noted, is concrete panels for the Volks boat launch. Right now it's a gravel pad. It holds up fairly well. At another launch in Honey Harbor, we did have some issues with the gravel, and we went in and put down some 2-inch stone and compacted it, and it seems to be holding up very well. If this project does not proceed, we will likely do the same thing at Volks, just under our maintenance budget. So at this time, we're recommending that the project be carried into 2022 for consideration when we look at the capital budgets for 2022.
Okay, thank you. What I have in front of me is moved by Councillor Jarvis, second by Councillor Wienko. Be it resolved that council directs staff to cancel the 2021 Volks boat launch panel tender, and that the funds from the 2021 be carried forward into the 2022 capital budget, and that the project be considered in conjunction with other capital projects for the 2022 capital budget. Any questions or discussion? Councillor Wienko, followed by Councillor Cooper.
I guess I'll just ask a general question for all three of these projects. Is there a possibility some of these costs might come down next year when materials are more readily available and might be cheaper and so on? Is this a material issue or is it a labor issue? Why the increase, and could this come down next year because of reductions?
Through the mayor, contractors have expressed to us that they are quite busy right now, so they are bidding higher on projects because if they're going to get the project, they want it to be worthwhile. They have enough work going on already to keep their crews busy. That's part of it. Part of it is materials, and I get different stories on whether the cost of the materials will be going up or down next year. So I think if we include these in the 2022 budget and tender them much earlier than we did this year, we may see a difference in the pricing.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor. And Brad, thank you for your report. I just wonder, based on your comments, why we're even bringing it forward to 2022. You noted that there's a solution that's already been fairly successful in Honey Harbor. And I'm thinking in terms of I think next year we're going to have financial challenges as well. So if we can do it less expensively and under our regular operations maintenance program, why are we even considering it next year? Could you sort of respond to that? Thank you.
Sure, I'd be glad to. I think it's our diplomatic way of suggesting that it perhaps not be pursued in the future, at least in 2022. And therefore, including it with whatever else we're going to have for consideration in 2022, we'll have a better, when you look at the full breadth of projects, you'll see the wants that we have and the needs. And I'm sure that for the most part, the needs will be the priorities. And personally, I would see this as a want as opposed to a need. But I think it's better to consider this and the other projects in the full context of what's proposed for next year as opposed to one-offs.
If I may, thank you for that. And I'm all for diplomacy, but I'm also all for reality. Thank you.
I think it's important to note that in all three resolutions, the second line reads that the funds from 2021 be carried to 2022. And then the third line reads that the project be considered in conjunction with other projects. So in other words, these projects will be on the list. It doesn't mean they'll end up being included in the budget. Councillor Bochek.
Just to attest to Mayor Coatsier's comments there, the culvert that we've been trying to replace up on Pratt's Road has been deferred, and it's now 7 years. And it's still an ongoing project. It's just that the money hasn't been in the budget. We've carried it from year to year. The public understands. And I think just because we're deferring this doesn't mean it isn't going to happen sometime in the future. And I think our residents appreciate that. So thank you for your comments, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Would you like me to reread the first resolution? This is in regards to the Volks boat launch panel, and the funds will be carried forward and the project will be considered along with other projects. Moved by Councillor Jarvis, second by Councillor Wanko. All those in favor? All right, that is carried. Thank you. The second resolution in this trio is moved by Councillor Bochek, seconded by Councillor Cooper. Be it resolved that the council directs staff to cancel the tender for the Port Severn Fire Hall flooring replacement, and that the funds be carried forward in the 2022 capital budget, and that the project be considered in conjunction with other capital projects for the 2022 capital budget. Any discussion on the Port Severn Fire Hall flooring? All those in favor? And that is carried. And then I have moved by Councillor Douglas, seconded by Councillor Hazelton. Be it resolved that council directs staff to cancel the CSB concrete patio tender results, and the funds be carried forward in the 2022 capital budget, and that the project be considered in conjunction with other capital projects in the 2022 capital budget. Any question or discussion on the patio next door? Councillor Wanko, followed by Councillor Jarvis.
But I was just wondering, some of those concrete panels on that walkway, can they be leveled out with own staff labor? I assume here you're planning on doing something different with that whole area to buy new materials and so on, but can we actually rebalance those stones and get them level again with our own staff?
Through the mayor, I'm actually considering something similar to that. The issue we're having is the patio, the interlocking stones are degrading. It's not that they're sinking or heaving, they're actually falling apart and dissolving. That doesn't sound right. So we're going to look at if we can use some of the stones from one side to make the other side look proper, and then perhaps shrink the patio on the other side, or just do that in concrete. See if we can do something with our own forces. But that's something we'll be discussing in the next couple of weeks, and we'll be able to report to you in the future.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
Quick question. CSB means nothing to me.
Canada Savings Bond.
I'm sorry about that. It's community services building where the library is.
Yeah, no, I gathered from the conversation just now. Thank you very much.
Okay, any other questions or comments? I mean, I think it's highly unusual for Director Sokash to come to us and say he doesn't want to do work. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Okay. So now, next on our list will be our clerk. Welcome, Ms. Way, at least visually now. And you want to talk to us about a calendar?
I do. Usually around the fall of the year before, we look for an approved calendar so we can at least start planning all of our meetings and dates for the next year. Normally, this would be a very consistent schedule from January to December. However, next year is an election year. So we see regular scheduled meetings from January into September. October with the election throws a bit of a wrench into things. And impacts some of the meeting schedules. So there is less meetings in October. Once again, in November, the new term of council begins. So at which time we have an inaugural meeting, but not a regular council meeting or any committee meetings. And then in December, we have our first, what will be a first regular council meeting, but once again, no committee meetings as it is a new term of council. And then hopefully we can return to regularly scheduled meetings in 2023, which seems very far away to say that year. But that's kind of where this calendar is coming from at this point in time.
All right, thank you. Any questions or observations in regard to this calendar? Councillor Hazelton, followed by Councillor Rienko.
Yes, I noticed that you have planning committee frequently on Fridays. I'm wondering, we had discussed on planning committee to do a poll as to what dates would be best suited for each planning committee member, and then come up with a weekday that would work for that. I haven't seen that process go through. I'm just wondering, have you learned something that I haven't been part of, or how did we get these Fridays?
The Fridays were already scheduled in my draft calendar. I was informed that planning committee wants to meet monthly, so I updated it to be monthly. There are other factors to consider, so we can go back and potentially look at changing it if Fridays are not suitable for all committee members or all planning committee members, but also takes into account time between our meetings for staff to be able to prepare for each of these meetings, as well as so there's no interference with district council meetings as well.
So like by way of my request here, I would ask that you cycle back with the planning committee and circulate a availability poll, because we wouldn't want to, I don't think, schedule a planning committee that, as it turns out, important attendance is not available.
No,
So other than
absolutely.
that, I mean, the council meetings and everything else is pretty much the same as we already know it. But given that we have a kind of a ununderstood priority in planning committee, I think it's really reasonable for us to reach out and ask the planning committee members to collectively agree on the best date for them, and then proceed from there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper. Didn't I thought I saw your hand up. Maybe I saw some. Oh, Councillor Rienko, I think, had a hand up. I apologize. Why do I put down a C instead of a W? I don't know.
Yeah, no, I had the same question that Councillor Hazelton had about getting a consensus from the planning committee. The only issue here that is only personal to me and not anybody else is that basically I have council week, and then I have district week, and then I have planning committee week, which basically kills basically 3 weeks of a month for me. But again, that's only for me, but it's going to be hard to schedule any vacations in and not miss some of these meetings, but that's just me. But I think you should do a survey, and it would be nice if we can maybe include these planning committees during, say, the district week or something like that to help out.
Any other comments? I'm going to make one comment if I may.
Mhm.
And that is, and I don't know if it's been discussed recently or not, but we have the Committee of Adjustment the same week as council. And I know it's been that way for a long period. But that means the planning department has to work on planning council and committee in the same week. So it's kind of gives them an intense week of deadlines, if I can put it that way, because of course the deadlines are prior. Whereas I'm sometimes wondering whether Committee of Adjustment could be like 2 weeks later or 2 weeks earlier if you prefer. And therefore maybe, and I think we should talk with the planning department, maybe smooth out their deadlines a little more. I don't know if this has ever been contemplated by the township in recent history. But it was brought up by one of the planners in discussion a short while ago. And I thought, yeah, it's an interesting question.
Mhm.
Not that we're going to solve it today. Now I see Councillor Cooper's hand.
Thank you, Mayor Kutzier, and an interesting suggestion, but I would suggest also that we poll the Committee of Adjustment too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so is this direction to staff or are we deferring the meeting schedule at this point in time? I guess.
I think under the circumstances, it might make sense to defer until next month. And I think everybody's okay with the council meetings. And I thought it was interesting not having a council meeting in November. I mean, because we know there's been a history of lame duck council meetings around the country for that matter, and what they sometimes do after the election, but before the new group is sworn in. So if we can get away without a council meeting in November, it might be politically wise.
There's also a shortened lame duck period as well, so it doesn't leave a lot of time to even sneak in another
Yeah.
meeting this
Fair
time.
enough.
So, yeah. And I don't have time to do one, so there's that caveat as well.
Councillor Hazelton.
I see that there's an inaugural council on the 21st of November,
Correct.
scheduled for 2022. Council term begins the 15th. I'm just wondering if it's possible to put that inaugural council meeting sometime on the kind of the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, the 15th through the 18th. And why not?
Because our procedural bylaw says it's on the first Monday following the date of inauguration, or the date of the first term of council, as well as all of the district councils need to, or all of the municipalities within the district need to organize when our meetings are, because there's an overlap of dignitaries that we all request to attend. So one, it's our procedural bylaw would stipulate it's November 21st, and B, it's because we have to coordinate with all of the other municipalities in the district, including the district,
So,
which has already been done.
so we could change our procedural bylaw. That's not a big thing. We could vote on it, but are you saying that we couldn't get the so-called dignitaries needed on that Tuesday through Friday?
It may overlap with other district municipalities whose meetings would regularly have already been scheduled on that Wednesday or Thursday as well. I'm not sure what an extra 3 or 4 days would do within your term. It'd be similar as if previous terms, if December 1st was Wednesday, and then your inaugural council meeting would have been to the following Monday and any other term.
Okay.
Is there a goal in moving it forward by a couple of days? Like, is there?
Well, again, you've heard from Councillor Wianco where he's challenged with vacations. It seems that we always want to schedule things the week of American Thanksgiving, and that impacts travel times and things like that. We, there are some of us who have or are partially American or have American family. And if we could keep things out of that week, that would be great. If other townships in our district have things going on that week, then perhaps they've already seen that there is value in opening up that week so that we're not conflicting with American Thanksgiving, which Again, selfishly, I would certainly like to see us find a way to do that.
Side note to this, though, speaking of scheduling things that isn't necessarily relevant, but it may be relevant. There is also additional training days that any elected or council-elect would have to attend within November that aren't confirmed yet. So this is just one date that any new member of council would have to commit to.
All right, I think though, given the couple of questions we've asked, it might be appropriate to defer this until we vote on until next month. I think that most of the council dates themselves nobody's talking about changing them, but maybe a couple of the committees or the and we'll leave it with you one more month in this way if that's all right.
Yep, absolutely.
And I think counseling, can I get head nods? Just, I don't think I have to get a vote, but head nods make me feel better. I'm seeing heads nod. That's a good thing. Thank you. All right. So that takes care of staff reports. And now new business. And the first item of new business is in regard to this 109 Ravine Way, a request to revoke the repair order. And I think this is a little bit unusual, if I understand it correctly, because the legal advice is we have to say something in public, but then we go into close to discuss some of the details. So Ms. Gunby, are you going to lead us through this?
I am not going to lead you through this at the moment. I'm hoping we can put this towards the end. I think people were informed that it would be being heard at 2 p.m. and not 10 a.m.
Okay.
So we just have to touch base with the players here
All
to
right.
make sure they're available.
Why don't we put off 10A until this afternoon, along with our consent agenda?
Perfect.
Okay. Then I believe Councillor Hazelton will have the floor for the next three items. The first one being commercial use of the Port of Honey Harbor. Councillor Hazelton.
So if I assume that everybody has read the agenda package, there shouldn't be a whole lot to present here. We have a situation in our township which is kind of odd. We allow road-based taxis to drive around and pick up anybody anywhere, but we don't allow water taxis to pick up at the docks in the township. And I think we're trying to drive business to the Port of Honey Harbor, and yet we have no commercial use of that port at this point in time. And so my recommendation here is that we ask staff to go back and look at the situation and come up with some recommendations that would allow us to create an incentive, if you will, even if it's only in the short term, whatever that might be, 1 year, 2 years, whatever, that would encourage commercial use of the Port of Honey Harbor and other township docks, so that we can start to drive that commercial intent, which was one of the premises at the beginning of the project. Thank you.
Before I turn it over to council, is there any staff member that wants to speak to this? Ms. Gumby?
I can, definitely. So Councillor Hazelton and I had a conversation last week where I explained if this were to pass, we would then have to bring back the license of occupation policy that we have and the user fees and charges bylaw that we have.
Okay. So I'm going to go Councillor Bocheck, followed by Councillor Wanko to ask your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Councilor Hazelton. I don't think this is a bad idea. I'm kind of surprised that it didn't come forward from the Community Advisory Group, the KEG, which is responsible for brainstorming and bringing ideas to the Committee of the Whole. So I think the committee was put together as an advisory group to advise council, and I would like to see something coming through that group as well too, to add support to Councillor Hazelton's request.
Thank you. Councillor Wanko.
Yeah, I was going to bring up that point too. But the other thing is I want to bring up too is that my understanding of fees as we go forward in our fee bylaw is that the township really can't make a profit on a fee. And so I would think that the fee that was set for the Honey Harbor docks is based on the usage of those docks and having to maintain them. So maybe I get some clarification on that. Is that basically fee is to maintain the docks over the years, or is it actually to make a profit? But my understanding that would not allow to make a profit on fees. So maybe I can get some clarification on what the fees are used for.
Ms. Gunby.
Yeah, thanks, through your worship. They're not for making a profit or for maintaining the docks. It's just in our user fees and charges bylaw that license of occupation is this much, and then you can renew it again. And that was sort of the determination that we came up with for this scenario, would be for the water taxis in order to sort of secure a spot.
In effect, reserve a spot on the dock
Mhm.
as opposed to taking their chances.
Correct.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
Yeah, I know that there's a taxi service that uses Village Marina. I don't know what if there's any cost to them to do that. They're regularly taking people out to the parks. I know that for a fact. I've seen them loading on a regular basis. So I'm in agreement with the concept. I think it is a good idea that the CAG have some input on this. Thank you, Councillor Bocek, for that input. But the idea is, I think, as Councillor Hazelton has suggested, is we're trying to encourage use of that facility, and until people start using it habitually, cost or no cost, it's going to be sort of an empty place. And I know when I came in for the Bee Festival, the only other boat there, I think, was the mayor's at the time. A few other boats arrived, but that was it. It wasn't that busy, despite the fact that it was a busy festival. So I would really like to see that complex of docks used more. And I think in the short term, to encourage that, I think this is a very, very good idea. But I also think that maybe impetus from the CAG would be supportive in that regard.
Okay, I have moved by Councillor Hazelton, seconded by Councillor Jarvis. Be it resolved, the council directs staff to review the license of occupation process for non-road-based taxi or water taxi services, and that the review includes proposed rates for license of occupation fees that are in line with the land-based taxi services, and the impacts of removing the LOO requirements for water taxis, and that a revised process to regulate water taxi service in the township of Georgian Bay be regulated by a bylaw or policy to be implemented at the December 2021 council meeting. Any discussions on this resolution? For any further discussion? Councilor Rienko.
Well, I would be supportive of sending it back to the CAG for review before it comes back to council.
So are we suggesting an amendment to this resolution, an additional paragraph?
Or deferral, just deferral till we get some feedback from the CAG group.
Councillor Hazelton.
The way it was worded, it gives staff the option of reviewing things, and they can review it with the CAG if they want. Pushing it back to CAG will just introduce an arbitrary delay. And what's perhaps interesting for those other councillors is the observation of the disparity or the difference between land-based taxis and water-based taxis has come from a CAG member. So it's not unique. And perhaps in a perfect world where a councillor was allowed to be visible at a CAG meeting, recommendations like this could be made to CAG. But as you all know, a councillor like myself cannot be a member of the CAG and can't participate in meetings. And therefore, ideas like this are pretty much hard to get into the CAG unless you go through, an external formal process. So I'll leave it at that.
Councilor Hazelton, I do believe that anyone, including yourself, could submit suggestions to the CAG. And given that this was coming from a member of the CAG, I'm a little surprised that that member didn't bring it up at CAG. But nonetheless, having said that, you know, we can defer this, which basically puts this whole thing off for a month, or we could, if we chose, refer it to the CAG, or we can pass it and then leave it up to staff to take it to the CAG. Councilor Jarvis.
I find I'm in agreement with your option 3 there. I think staff have heard enough from us. They know that maybe CAG should be included in any research they do. So I'd be happy with passing it with the understanding that staff will be looking at all the options there.
Councilor Cooper.
I'm happy with that as well. I just would like to suggest that this is a decision of council. It's be great to get advice from the CAG, but they're not the decision makers on this as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
All right, Councilor Bochek.
Yeah, I'm quite fine passing this resolution that Councillor Hazelton brought today, but I do want written into that resolution that we direct staff to engage the CAG and have them bring back their feelings to the next committee of the whole meeting, or the committee of the whole meeting following their next meeting. But I think this resolution as it stands can be passed as long as we give staff direction to engage with the CAG.
I want to caution you that part of the resolution says a policy to be implemented at December 2021, which means if we go to the formal to the CAG and CAG to the committee of the whole to council, it'll never get done by December 2021.
Right. So we, as far as I recollect, the water is pretty much hard as of January, so it isn't going to matter much.
Well, I would have guessed that the December 2021 date was picked so it could set fees for 2022.
Right. Yeah. It's I don't think that needs to be part of the resolution. I don't think we need a timeline on this, but I agree it needs to be addressed. But the reason for the CAG was this exact purpose. So I'm fine passing it today. I don't think it needs to be deferred as long as the CAG gets direction to review this and bring back a report to Cal.
I think staff has heard the direction. The way the resolution, I'll read the resolution again. Moved by Councillor Hazelton, seconded by Councillor Jarvis. Be it resolved that council directs staff to review the license of occupation process for non-road-based taxi services, and that the review includes proposed rates for license of occupation fees that are in line with land-based taxi services, and impacts of removing the LOO requirement for water taxis, and that a revised process to regulate water taxi services in the Township of Georgian Bay be regulated by a bylaw or policy to be implemented at the December 2021 council meeting.
So to my point again, there's no recommendation in that resolution that this should go to the CAG. And I won't support the resolution unless there is a line in there that says that this will be taken to the CAG and they will bring back a report to Cal. Without that, I won't support it.
Well, then we'd have to also then remove the December 2021 council meeting deadline, because I believe that'll be impossible to meet if we go to CAG, then to COW before coming back to council.
That's our procedure, and it's that we have to remove that date, then that's fine.
Councillor Douglas, I think I saw your hand.
No, I was just, I'm just going to concur with you that I think we need to remove the December meeting date. I don't think this stuff or the CAG is going to have time to do a report and get back to us on that. So I'd be fine with the passing this as long as we can pull that, make sure the CAG gets back to us so we can review it before it's passed.
Okay. Councillor Hazelton, this was your resolution. So we can either go friendly amendments or start all over again. What do you think?
Something that I think everybody needs to understand, and that is that water taxis today are picking up at the Honey Harbor Town docks, violating the policy that we have on license of occupation. And in theory, could be challenged and fined every time they pick up at the Honey Harbor Town docks. And it's not one taxi supplier, it's several taxi vendors. The taxi vendors are also picking up at all the marinas in the Honey Harbor area. And the objective of this was twofold. Number one, ask staff to go away and do some work and come back to us with their recommendations. And two, set a timeline on it so that we have something to work with in a reasonable time frame. We've already seen this task list that we have asked for. It's unfortunately didn't make the cut for this meeting, but we have many items of direction to staff that have not been performed going back to 2019. And what I did not want to see here is this item, which will impact our 2022 season. I didn't want to see it left in dangling in these multi-step processes. So I think that whether you change December to January, you shouldn't be putting a date on it way out into the future. If you want to add the council direct staff to review and talk to CAG, blah, blah, blah. You can do all of that if you want. I don't really care. I just think that we as a township council need to recognize that we have a policy that is in place today that is being violated on a daily basis. And we are in a situation where we could be fining all of these taxi operators, but we're not. We're just looking the other way. I think we need to clean that whole thing up, and it should be fairly easy to do by directing staff to do what they can do best and do the research for us and come back with recommendations.
I'm going to take all that to mean you're actually not that open to a friendly amendment.
But I didn't say that. If you want to,
I know you did.
The very beginning of it to say council direct staff to do whatever they do and talk to CAG, fine, put that in there. If you want to change the date to January or February, fine, I'm okay with that. I don't care. I just think that we as council, as Councillor Cooper pointed out, the council needs to make decisions on what we do here. CAG chose, actually, for those of you who sit in on CAG, one of the regular attendees of CAG the other day was shocked that they were talking about something other than a Honey Harbor waterfront program because he thought the CAG was only focused on that project. And we were talking, they were talking about other projects in the Honey Harbor area. So it doesn't surprise me for a second that matters like this don't come from CAG, because their ideas generally are that they are only to talk about things that they have been directed to, generally speaking. So anyways, I'll stop talking.
Councillor Cooper.
I suggest that I think it's a good idea to have a date. And if December 21st or whatever the date was isn't doable, let's put a date on it so that it gets done, and let's call it in January 21st or whatever we choose. But I think if we put it out another month, it should be enough time to get the job done, I hope. Thank you.
All right, so we have a suggestion that December 2021 become January 2022. Okay. I think I saw Councillor Hazelton's head nod, so we're going to call that a friendly amendment. Councillor Rianco.
And add the CAG in there, and then I think we're okay. I think you'll get a unanimous decision if you add the words in there about going to the CAG.
Okay. All right, so I now have a resolution in front of me that reads, moved by Councillor Hazelton, seconded by Councillor Jarvis. Be it resolved that council directs staff to review, including with the Honey Harbor Community Advisory Group, the license of occupation process for non-road-based taxi services. And that the review includes proposed rates for license of occupation fees that are in line with the land-based taxi services and the impacts of removing the LOO requirements for water taxis. And that a revised process to regulate water taxi services in the township of Georgian Bay be regulated by bylaw or policy to be implemented at the January 2022 council meeting. All those in favor? And that is carried. All right. Next on our list is the Environmental Bill of Rights, Section 74, application for investigations. Councillor Hazelton, over to you.
I mentioned in my report of communications that I've had lots of communications with people in the community about environmental matters. The community of South Honey Harbor continue to reach out, and as I have noted before, there's 200+ residents in South Honey Harbor that are very upset with MECP and the process that they appeared to have gone through for issuing a couple of ECAs. And there is an opportunity to challenge MECP to actually tell us what they did and how they did it, so that it comes basically more transparent in the work that they have done, so that we can fully understand the processes and decisions and considerations that they had. And so in the South Honey Harbor area, they are being represented by the Eastern Georgian Bay Protective Society, and that is one of the entities that would be driving forward a Section 74 challenge under the Environmental Bill of Rights. And we are asking here that the Township of Georgian Bay be the second organization to support this request. This is in line with the support that we had from the township lawyer in the LPAT hearing, where the township lawyer wrote a letter of support supporting the Eastern Georgian Bay Protective Society to get party status, to be able to ask questions. Sadly, the LPAT chose to not accept them as a party status, and therefore all of the questions that they had wanted to ask to essentially get information more transparently on the table, all of that failed. And so this resolution is an attempt to drive that process of information release and transparency, and I would ask that you consider that. Thank you.
If I may, Councillor Hazelton, a point of clarification. In the resolution that I see, the very last sentence has a blank in it. And it reads that the Township of Georgian Bay understands that any legal costs associated with this appeal will be borne by the community and not by the Township of Georgian Bay, as confirmed by blank. I don't think we want to consider a resolution with a blank.
It's a good point. It's not the way the resolution was written. This was staff's edit, and I'm not quite sure why that's in there, but I can confirm that the Eastern Georgian Bay Protective Society has confirmed to me that they would not be seeking any legal costs from the township for this process. So again, it's not the format of the final clause that I provided, but I'm sure our CAO has some reason for putting it in, so maybe we could ask her for clarification.
Ms. Gunby.
I wish I had something to offer, but I did not alter your resolution.
Ms. Wade, do you know anything about this?
The only thing I can speak to is the fact that generally when we're looking for costs, this is just saying that the cost will be borne by, sorry, not be borne by the township, but who is that being, who is taking on that cost then? because right now just saying it's the community cost doesn't really confirm that. And I'm sure our treasurer would be happy to know where this funding is coming from, because at the outset, the cost would need to be put forth generally by the township if there's any legal cost to bear. So we just need to know where those funds are coming from.
So the the direction here is to have the township basically sign the application, and preferably to have CEO Gunby work with the Eastern Georgia Bay Protective Society to complete the statement of belief, which is paragraph 2. And the Eastern Georgia Bay Protective Society, which I think I'll say generally we know is the entity that is representing the community of South Honey Harbor. And that entity has confirmed to me that any costs beyond the township's world would be covered by the community, i.e. Eastern Georgia Bay Protective Society. I don't know if that is clear enough or not.
All right. Ms. Way.
Sorry, I just, from the intent, it sounds like that the cost will be borne by the Eastern Georgian Bay Protective Society, but until we have that in writing or knowing that they're going to take on that initial cost or how that may officially pan out, us authorizing it to be so doesn't necessarily make it so, because we don't regulate them.
Okay, well, let's not get to the fine print of this. Yeah, I think we understand the intent, and we may change the wording a little bit, but I think what makes sense now is for council to discuss this and we'll get their viewpoints on this before we fine tune the resolution, because there may or may not be other edits. And I'm going to start with Councillor Bochek because I see his hand first, followed by Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a point of order. I've been contacted by some residents in Honey Harbor, and they're saying they're trying to watch our Township of Georgian Bay YouTube channel for council on the 12th of October, and it says that it took place 5 days ago and that nobody can watch this live.
Oh.
And I've been given a screenshot of the Township of Georgian Bay YouTube channel that says it took place 5 days ago. I don't know if this helps anybody.
Can you flip me that email?
I can forward this to you, yes.
Oh my God, we're late for our meeting.
My screen says it's streaming, so.
Yes, my computer here says that we're recording live, but I guess it's on custom live streaming service, but nobody can get it.
Okay.
So I'll shoot that to you.
Yeah, if you can send that to me, and then I'll reach out to them.
Thank you. And I do have comments, but I'm going to let other people go first while I take care of this. Thank you.
Okay, then we'll go to Councillor Cooper. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Katsir. And I just wanted to say that I believe, as Councillor Hazelton has pointed out, that the township already took a position previously, although the evidence wasn't able to be submitted in front of LPAT. So to support this, I think, is certainly very appropriate and in line with the community. So as long as there aren't costs associated for the township, and it's really an indication of support for getting all the information out in some fashion, then I fully support this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wienko.
A couple of issues here in the second paragraph of the report. It talks about that there was false and misleading information submitted to on the ECA. Is that true? I see it written here, but I'm not aware of any false and misleading information that was provided. I guess that's the first question. In the second question, I want to get some feedback from CEO Gumby as to her feelings about working with the Eastern Georgian Bay Protection Society on this issue.
I will just say through your worship that it is up to council to direct me to do so. I have no opinion either way on working with them. So I just would prefer for council to get all their questions out first before we even go any further and decide on that.
Okay, well, maybe my first question then could be addressed. What is this false and misleading information? Is it somebody's idea or is it actually a fact?
Councillor Hazelton, your report.
Sure. So the process of an ECA is the ECA is completed and the ECA is submitted to MECP. The ECA, that in the process of completing the ECA, there are statements that are made that need to be not false and need to be not misleading. I can basically preempt the next section of the next topic, which gets into Indigenous communication. In the latest ECA form that was completed, there is a requirement to state that there is no Indigenous interest in the matter. And the Indigenous community have already reached out and told us that they have an interest in the environment and the fish areas of this area, and they're asking specific questions about this area. So that would be one example of false or misleading information. There likely is others, but the intention here wasn't to go back and revisit all of the details of the ECA application process. It was to ask that we go through a process of requesting MECP to be more transparent in their decision processes and allow us to and allow the community to feel more comfortable about the fact that MECP is in fact looking after the environment in our communities.
Councillor Rankle, you want to follow?
Yeah, because basically it says it would appear that some information provided to the MECP in the application of the ECA. So in other words, what this statement is saying is that during the application itself, some misleading information was provided. I think the Indigenous thing comes after their decision. So what information was wrong that was provided to the ministry? And does the ministry agree? I can see individual opinions here, but if you think that there was misleading or wrong information submitted to the MECP, they would review their decision. So what false information was submitted to them?
So what you're suggesting is exactly what we are trying to get to here. You think, and you've said, that if misleading information was provided, that they would have an interest in reviewing that information and making sure it was correct. I can assure you that the application that was signed explicitly stated that there was no relevant Indigenous opinions to be had on this matter. That is factually wrong, as we will learn in the next resolution, where the Wasask-Sing First Nations are stepping up and saying, we have an interest in this area and we want to know more, and we were not consulted, and there is an absolute requirement for consultation with the Indigenous community. So that is what I'll call a very simple binary. Were they consulted? No. Was that false and misleading? Yes. Maybe there was more other false and misleading information. And rather than getting into a kind of a debate on and rehashing the whole thing, I think what we want to do is basically put the ball back in MECP's court and say, what did you actually do? How did you review this? How did you end up coming to the conclusion that the ECA was appropriate when 2 peer reviews found all kinds of flaws
Okay,
in the design?
let's get back to whether or not we want to follow the recommendations of this resolution. I'm going to go to Councillor Douglas, followed by Councillor Jarvis.
Thank you. Personally, I don't think we should be putting anything in any report that says there is significant, well, the concerns I don't have a problem with, but that there was omissions or misleading or false information. I really think that puts us in a very compromised position. That may be an opinion, but I think that we're getting into the weeds here with something that could become quite legal. So personally, I would not put my name to this or vote on this for that reason. I do believe that there's merit to this. I just think that the wording has to be very cautious. I don't think we have the right to say it appears that information. I think this needs to be reworded a little bit in order to cover what Councillor Hazelton is trying to address here, because I think there's some very good points here, but that is, we really can't be saying, I don't think we can be saying that it appears to be this. Well, that should just be omitted. I mean, if you can reword that in a way that the public does not feel that it was entirely covered properly and in depth, that's one thing, but there's some accusations in here I think could be quite detrimental to us.
Councillor Jarvis.
May I helpfully suggest the resolution has nothing in it with regards to any allegations. The resolution is pretty straightforward, so I don't see any issue with that whatsoever. And I think that's really, really important that we look at the resolution. The report is background for us as part of our deliberations here. So, and I think you should also bear in mind that when it says it would also appear that some of the information provided the MECP. The fact of the matter is we're trying to find out whether that information is correct or not. And by asking for more transparency from the MECP, everybody can then therefore determine whether there was false and misleading information provided to the MECP. And that's what we're asking for. So I see nothing wrong with the resolution as it stands. I do understand that there is an issue over making sure that costs are borne by getting confirmation, I think, from the Eastern Georgian Bay Protective Society. Al would probably be appropriate, I think, on this. If you've got documentation already, we just provide that, and that would probably cover it. But yeah, the resolution, just look at the resolution. The report is for us as background. The resolution would clear up any appearances of misrepresentation or misinformation being provided to the MECP. And that's what we're asking for, I believe. I hope I got that right, Al.
Councillor Wojcik, do you want to speak to this before I step in? And then Councillor Cooper has indicated he wants to lead off the second round.
No, I'm fine. I have no comments. I made myself perfectly clear a few months ago when this came up, so I'll just simply vote on it.
All right. I will admit I have some concerns, and the concerns are about let me call it confusion. I mean, in the beginning, and the first paragraph refers to the Township of Georgian Bay will apply under Section 74 for an investigation. Okay, so in other words, the township is the applicant. However, and then it proceeds to say, but we won't pay anything. And I think it's very important to understand that in the prior situation, which is referred to in the report, the township consented to the Eastern Georgian Bay Protective Society to speak at the LPAT hearing. We consented, even though we didn't speak ourselves. And I think I'm concerned here because if we present ourselves as the applicant, then we're taking on the responsibilities versus consenting, which is, I think, quite a different thing. So I don't think that the consent from the prior situation with the LPAD actually is precedence here. I have real difficulty voting for this until our lawyer speaks to it, because I think we could get ourselves in a very awkward position if we are the applicant and then, in effect, a resident effectively is speaking on our behalf. And that, I'm not comfortable with that. And this is absolutely not a criticism of the resident or of the Eastern Georgia Marine Protective Society or the Endeavor. I just don't want a non-staff member or consultant or lawyer of the township speaking for the township. And that's the awkwardness I have with this, is that there may well be, or there may not be problems if the investigation takes place. I'm not judging that. What I'm saying is either we're the applicant and it's our program, or we are consenting to or agreeing with, or what, I'm not sure what the right words are. We're not objecting to, probably is the right word. We are not objecting to the Eastern Georgian Bay Protective Society or a group of residents to launching this application. I mean, obviously our lawyer is not involved in this conversation at this moment, but I personally would be uncomfortable moving forward without the lawyer advising the appropriate wording. Those are my comments for now. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor Kutzier, and I think consultation with our lawyer is certainly appropriate, but I really don't see an awful lot in the resolution itself that should be that controversial. We're trying to get to the truth, and that's really what this is about: is making sure that all the information is out there, that people that should have been consulted have been consulted, and I guess the other thing I would like to say is that. Perhaps if there's some concern about some of the verbiage in the report, it's not the resolution as has been pointed out, but B, if the term false is changed to missing information or missing approvals, then that is what apparently has happened here. There was no consultation with the Indigenous community. So, and there should have been. So I'm supportive of getting this done. And if we need some legal advice on it, all well and fine. Thank you.
Councillor Jarvis.
Mr. Mayor, I'm finding your ideas, your thoughts are quite useful. And I'm wondering if it's a helpful change here. It may slow things down. I'm not sure whether there's some deadlines that are sort of that we have to work within, but Al, would it be better just from the standpoint of getting legal an opinion on this? Why don't we just leave it as paragraph 1 and forget the rest for the time being until we've got Garrett Pickfield's concurrence that that's how we should be proceeding, and that's a sound way of proceeding. Mr. Mayor, would that be sort of in line with your thinking as well?
Well, I mean, the first paragraph says seeks concurrence. No, I'm still find it awkward because then we're asking whether or not we want to pay for this legal application, and I know we won't get a unanimous vote on that. I have no idea how it will fall, but I'm.
It would be more like seeking an opinion from our council, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Councillor Bocek. Oh, sorry, I saw Councillor Wanko first. Councillor Wanko followed by Councillor Bocek.
Yeah, the more you talk and the more information I'm receiving, I'm getting concerned that we're kind of flogging a dead horse here. I'm concerned that I've always been concerned about the legal fees that we're spending in this township. And this decision that's been made, the ministry is not going to change their mind no matter what. So why are we spending more legal funds to berate the ministry, which is probably not a good idea. And I don't think CEO Gumby is too keen to get involved. That's a personal opinion, but I don't think she's that keen to get involved. So why are we flogging a dead horse here? And I just, the decisions have been made. Let's fight another battle some other time with the ministry. But I think this one here is not worth the effort to pursue it. You talk about the Indigenous issue. They weren't consulted on the Honey Harbor issue. Well, you can say that for any environmental issue in Ontario or in Canada. The Indigenous population should be consulted on all environmental issues, but they're not, unless it's close to a reserve. So I'm having some real problems here supporting this work that our own staff have other more important things to look at. I'm sure our lawyers do too. I just don't want to spend the money and time on this.
Councillor Bochek.
So in the meeting I was referring to, we had our lawyer on board in the meeting, and I asked the question specifically, is the township's only obligation to vote on approving the site plan application and the locations? And we were just a commenting agent. The Township of Georgian Bay is not involved in this process. We were a commenting agent that had the ability to approve the site plan location only. All these other issues have come up by the Georgian Bay Preservation Alliance and Councillor Hazelton. They have a legitimate battle. They don't feel that proper due course was taken care of. That's not the Township of Georgian Bay's responsibility. Our responsibility was to approve or not approve the site plan and the location. It's our only obligation to this whole process. It's a provincial matter, and we're getting dragged into it. And before you know it, we're going to have cost involved in it. And we're going to have staff time, which is a cost, whether you believe it or not, we pay them. And I want no part of this, absolutely no part of this. I agree with the Preservation Alliance. They have a battle. They have every right to be concerned and do what they need to do. But this council and this township and our taxpayers don't need to get dragged into this. We've already been told what our obligations were in this process. Thank you.
Councillor Hazelton.
I think to some degree we're missing an opportunity here in the comments that I'm hearing. Number one, the township isn't the applicant. The township could be an applicant. Section 74 requires 2 applicants, and that's why paragraph 2 was the topic about trying to work together with the other applicant on a statement of belief. So the township is not the applicant. It's not leading the charge. It's only participating in the charge. Number 2, we have, as a township, felt like we have been betrayed by MECP on a couple of matters, perhaps several matters. And this is an opportunity to go through an investigation process to truly understand what it is they look at and how they look at things, so that we don't get blindsided again in the future. So here we have an opportunity where the community wants to step up and lead this investigation and understand exactly what's going on and what happened and how did we get to the state of ECAs issued when, for example, the Indigenous community were not consulted. And by the way, Councillor Rienko, it is a checkbox on the form that is an absolute requirement. It is not a nice to have. It is an absolute requirement in the ECA form, and it was checked off by the applicant as not needed, and nobody seemed to pay any attention to it. So we are already hearing from the Indigenous community that they are concerned about that. So this is an opportunity for our township to support our community and get answers to questions that are floating around all over the place. And this is an ideal opportunity to understand basically a use case scenario of what happened yesterday so that we can be better prepared for tomorrow. And I would ask each of you to think about your own environments and understand that if MECP is involved, you could get blindsided in your jurisdictions by them having no regard for the matters at hand, or little regard for the matters at hand, including Indigenous rights. And this is an opportunity for us to do the right thing to support our community.
Councillor Jarvis, I think I've already heard you in this round.
Yeah, you have. And if you don't want to hear me again, it's okay. I'll mute myself, and I'll just speak because I want to anyway.
You can be brief.
Yeah, just quickly. The first line seeks concurrence with municipal legal counsel. Would that not mean that if our legal counsel was not prepared to provide concurrence, that we're not going anywhere anyway with this? I mean, doesn't that sort of leave us? I mean, that's sort of the out, I guess, if you want to look at it that way. We're asking Garrett Pickfield really to assist in this, and I'm finding myself very much in agreement with Councillor Hazelton on this. I don't want to abrogate our commitment to 200 plus constituents over their concerns on a situation that could have serious consequences for all of us. And there might be a better way of wording this. I'm open to that. I think Councillor Hazelton would be as well, but I think we need to. I think we do need to step up. Enough.
Okay. I have moved by Councillor Hazelton, seconded by Councillor Jarvis. Be it resolved that council directs staff to seek concurrence with the Municipal Legal Counsel, Gerald Pickfield LLP, to have the Township of Georgian Bay serve as an applicant per Section 74, application for investigation of the Environmental Bill of Rights, EBR, regarding the issuance of ECA 4320-AS4S4J with an issue date of November 22nd, 2017, and ECA 8093-BPF4JQ with an issue date of May 27th, 2020. And that council authorized the CEO Gunby and or municipal legal counsel work in conjunction with the Eastern Georgian Bay Protective Society, Inc., and or their legal counsel to provide the required statement of beliefs as per Section 74(3) of the Environmental Bill of Rights. And that the Township of Georgian Bay understands that any legal costs associated with this appeal will be borne by the community and not the Township of Georgian Bay, as confirmed by the Eastern Georgian Bay Protective Society, Inc. All those in favor? I see 3 in favor, and I see 4 against at this point. All confirming, all those against. And you can shake your head at me, Councillor Cooper, but I'm voting against, not because I don't agree with the intention. I disagree with the resolution as it reads and the implications of it in regards to costs and legal position. So that is defeated. I would much rather have seen a resolution that was asking for staff to investigate legal, or whether or not they want our consent, but to ask us to be an applicant without knowing without the legal advice, I think is premature. That's my explanation. And now we're going to go on to the next item, which is review of communication from Indigenous communities. Councillor Hazelton.
Once again, those of you who have read your package probably don't need much talk from me at this point in time. This resolution is just simply asking to direct staff to come up with a practice of handling First Nations correspondence, because apparently we don't have one, and that correspondence from First Nations be immediately circulated to council and the mayor, CL and clerk, and any other relevant departments in case there is a need for consideration of that correspondence. And that the township considers that this communications from First Nations is a top priority, because that would certainly reflect and agree with the land acknowledgement statement that we make at the beginning of each meeting. I just think that these are all very tightly aligned, and asking staff to come up with a practice or a policy is, I think, an appropriate step.
Ms. Gumby, do you care on behalf of staff to make any response before I turn it over to council?
I sure can. So if Councillor Hazelton is referring to comments for planning applications, for instance, they already get circulated to members of council. The one correspondence that is attached to the agenda was sent to planning staff to answer their questions. We have staff that do exchange emails here and there about maybe working together on an event or a project or a grant. I'm not sure those would be relevant or required for council to be reading. So I'm just, if this was to pass, I think we would just need a specific topic or reason why it would ever get circulated to council.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper, followed by Councillor Rienko.
Thank you, Mayor Kutzier. And this is a question for our CAO. And it really relates to what's being suggested here, but also what we just voted upon. With the application, the previous matter, the application would have been seen by our township and township staff or not. In other words, it is an application such as the one we just talked about that needs to be what we were suggesting, the three of us were suggesting that it go back to MOECP for review, along with the Eastern Georgia Bay Protection Society. I'm asking, was that application where there was a check mark made, was that reviewed by our township staff or not?
Not that I'm aware of.
So effectively what you're saying is, in the previous case, we didn't review that application. It just went from the applicant right to MOECP. There was no oversight on our part.
As far as I know.
I think we need to look into that. Thank you.
I think that's a separate topic from what's in front of us right now. Councillor Rienko, followed by Councillor Wojcik.
Thank you very much. I guess I've been around too long, but I can probably only count my one hand the number of times that we've seen correspondence from the First Nations. I wish we could receive more, but very rarely do we get communications from them. But what this resolution says is that they have the top priority when it comes in for communications. Well, I'm not sure why they should have top priority and not somebody else. Like, you know, why wouldn't a cottage association have top priority if an issue comes in on their area and so on? So I don't think the First Nations should be treated any differently than any other communications that we get. I would think that if letters came in from the First Nations, they should probably end up on our monthly chip. That when we get all that communication, I think that's a good place for this to show up. And if there is some feedback or correspondence coming back from our township, we should maybe know about that, because obviously the Stranding Island thing was a major issue, and of course we all want to keep up to date on that. So I don't think I can support this the way it is right now. The First Nations are important, but I think every piece of communications is equally important. And if we do get communications from them, they should probably be on the chip, so we all see what they're asking and what the communications is and so on. So I think there's a process in place for this, but I don't think they should have the top priority and everything gets dropped when the letter comes in from them.
Thank you. Councillor Wojcik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'm very interested in this resolution and the details behind it. As we know, most of our Indigenous population don't live on any of the we'll call them reserves because it's a bad word, but they don't live in Moose Deer Point, they don't live in the Watan Nation, they don't live in Beausoleil Nation, they live amongst us in our communities. So my question maybe to Councillor Hazelton is, are you looking at reaching out to the Indigenous governing bodies, say the Métis Council in Thunder Bay or Sault Ste. Marie or the Six Nations group? Who exactly are we going to be asking for comments on applications? Would it be the local band chiefs or I'm just very confused by this whole resolution. There's not a lot of detail in it. Perhaps somebody could answer me on that.
You're projecting way into the future here. All I'm suggesting here is we don't have a practice of handling correspondence from First Nations. We read this land acknowledgement statement, but what I've already heard from a couple of councillors is they aren't aware of hardly any communications from First Nations. I would think that given our priority of reading this land acknowledgement statement at the beginning of each meeting, that we would be, as councillors, interested in what the First Nations might be saying to us or asking of us. And so, number one, I think should have a practice. The second clause is about saying circulate those communications to us and appropriate staff. And the third one is really to take these First Nations communications as a high priority. If you want to change the word top to high priority, that's fine as well. But we pretend by reading the land acknowledgement statement that we really care about the Indigenous community, but we don't have a policy that reflects that. And that's really what this is all about. Let's put a policy in place that puts teeth into that land acknowledgement statement and says, when our First Nations communities are communicating with us, we're going to, first of all, read it, and then we're going to take appropriate action. That's all.
Councillor Douglas.
I think we do have a process in place where we get communications already from staff, and I think that we absolutely should be getting their communications as well in that package. I just don't think we've been getting any communication up to this point, or we would have seen it. I don't know why they would exclude any letters coming from any of the nations. So I think we already have something in place for that. And yes, I do think it should be circulated to us when we receive letters from them, as we get letters from various cottage communities or any other person that lives in the township of Georgian Bay and has a stake, is a stakeholder in our township. But I think we already have that process. And maybe Jessica can elaborate on that for me.
Ms. Gunby.
I do apologize. I was just speaking with our director of planning, so I missed the question I'm supposed to respond to.
What is our current policy in regards to sharing correspondence, basically?
So we have the CIP. So anything that is addressed to mayor and council gets put on the CIP. Something addressed to myself from anyone does not get put on the CIP. So if it's not addressed to mayor and council, then it doesn't get placed on there. And we don't really have a policy per se, but the CIP is in the procedural bylaw explaining what does get attached and included in that package.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis, Councillor Bochek has already spoken to this round. The council, I'll let Councillor Jarvis go ahead, please.
In light of our First Nations statement, in light of recent events with regards to the Prime Minister and last Thursday on the 30th when he didn't attend anything but went on vacation. I know that's got nothing to do with us directly, but indirectly as a community, I think we need to almost overstep our processes when it comes to the Indigenous community in order to try and correct the injustices of the past. And it might be overstating things a bit, but maybe in the short term, I think it would be good for us to show them that we are making a greater effort to listen to what they have to say. I'm not totally convinced that this resolution covers that. I don't know, but I think that in some form or other, we've got to be a little bit more cognizant of their concerns. I don't want to suggest to the rest of our community that we're going to give them absolute top priority, but they have to be listened to. And if we're not seeing the communications and we don't know what's going on, it makes it difficult for us to react or comment. I'm not sure we cover that, but I think it's really, again, I think it's imperative of us to listen to the communities, the Indigenous communities around us, because we do have them, and they are extremely important, and they have views and opinions that we have acknowledged are very relevant to how we live up here. Again, I'm a bit torn on this. I really, really like the idea of having a resolution that shows that we're making this effort. I understand how the CIP works. And I don't know how we can accommodate it within the CIP, because that would make sense to me. I'm just looking at the resolution as I'm talking here. So I'm a bit torn on this. I'm open to ideas on this, but I do want to see us showing, and I think the mayor, Mr. Mayor, you'll agree that we need to show a significant commitment to the Indigenous community in this respect.
Well, thank you. You know, I absolutely agree that I think our relations with our First Nation neighbors is extremely important. I have no issue with that whatsoever. I'm a little bit concerned about this resolution because it says all correspondence from First Nations. Does that mean when, for example, Ms. Schneier reaches out to, say Moose Deer Point about possibly sharing, being co-applicants on getting monies for a road repair? I think we're getting too much in the dirt. Plus, we also have to respect privacy to some degree. And I'm just picking on Ms. Schneier because I know she's been very active with our First Nations and building the relationship. If she receives a note from an individual there, I don't think we should oblige her to share that with us, because it could be a personal note or a private note. I think what's important to understand, Councillor Hazelton gave us a very extensive example. It was addressed to him. He copied CEO Gunby because he wanted her to reply to it or provide some information, which she did do. It was not addressed to council. It was not addressed to the township as a whole. And therefore, I think, and this is an example where if Councillor Hazelton wanted us to read this, he should have forwarded it to us, or request that it be put on the CIP, and Ms. Wade might have included it. So what concerns me about this resolution is it's far too encompassing. And because I absolutely do not want to see all correspondence received by our township. I mean, they get something like, I think the planning department at one point was talking about getting 200 emails a week or something like that. I don't want to see those. And so my concern here is that we're asking for something that is practically not really that practical, because if I get 200 emails a week from the township, I can tell you I'm not going to be paying full attention to all of them. Secondly, I don't want to step out of bounds on the privacy rules and regulations that we must follow, the confidentiality. Though I absolutely agree with the sentiment that if correspondence from a First Nation is received by township staff that they feel is relevant to the township as a whole, it should be shared with council. But that's importantly milder version than the resolution in front of me. That's my take on this. Councillor Douglas, I see your hand. Round two.
Round two. Yeah, those are all really good points, and I agree that, you know, we need to step up and provide some acknowledgement here to our First Nations. However, I think that anytime any correspondence comes in from anywhere and it's addressed to council, as our clerk, or as Jessica said, if it's addressed to mayor and council, then yeah, I think it should definitely go in the CIP. But I think that we get into put her in a position of having to make that decision, whether it's a personal, you know, it's personal information that's going out. I don't think we can ask our CAO to do that. I mean, that puts her in a very awkward position. If it's addressed to mayor and council, yes, or if perhaps it's a letter that should have gone to council, maybe. But you're asking her to make that decision. I think at all expenses, we need to make sure our policy reflects that mayor and council get the letters or correspondence that come to them. But there's a lot of things that I'm sure come to our township, to staff and otherwise, that's not meant for, you know, it's a question, as our mayor has said, we don't want to see all of it. But most certainly we want to acknowledge that it's certainly going to be dealt with the same way it is with all of our stakeholders in the township. And maybe there's some sort of a letter that can go out to them indicating that, you know, we welcome that. We welcome letters from them. We hope to see more, and that they will get published if it's addressed to mayor and council. That's my thought on it.
Okay, so I have Councillor Wienko, followed by Councillor Jarvis, followed by Councillor Vocek. But I just want to make one comment quickly, if I may, is that when Ms. Schneier and I were at Moose Deer Point, for instance, on September 30th, one of the things that we said to each other, we will definitely be communicating more. And that was two directions. I mean, we're definitely encouraging further communication and cooperation. And we did the same thing when we were at Wata. So that encouragement is taking place. So now I'm going to go, where was it? Councillor Jarvis, followed by Councillor Vocek, I believe. No, or sorry, Councillor Winkle. I put you down here twice, but I think I'll give you to speak at least once. Sorry about it. Councillor Winkle, followed by Councillor Jarvis, followed by Councillor Vocek.
Yeah, I think, Mr. Mayor, I think you hit the nail on the head there, where we, you know, individual councillors receive emails. Jessica obviously receives a lot of emails, and at times some of those emails we feel should be shared with council. So, you know, quite often you'll see emails from me with, you know, FOIA information, stuff that I get from SSCA. I've sent quite a bit of stuff out on the container cottages and so on that I receive from individuals. So I made the decision to share with council on some of that stuff. So I think we all have an obligation to share communications that come into us personally that we think all of council should see. So I think that's the way to do these things. And Jessica can make the same decision too, if she feels correspondence coming into herself should be shared with council, and then she should do that. So I think there's a process in place for everybody to share communications, and I have no problem with the present system. And I think we just have to be cognizant that we have an obligation to all of council to share information.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we could just leave this as providing a refreshed direction to CAO on council, the correspondence, particularly as it pertains to, well, no, not even that. I mean, just correspondence in general. If it should be part of the CIP, if that's how we want it, then we address it that way. In direction to our Indigenous partners in this community, that we advise them further that if they want stuff directed to council, they address it to council so that we get to see it that way. And we just leave this as direction to our CAO and to council in general, as opposed to a resolution.
I don't doubt they're going to take direction regardless of whether we vote on this or not. Councillor Bocheck.
Thank you. I guess I was unmuted anyways. Good thing I didn't say anything derogatory. My question is for CAO Gumby or for Christopher. I'm not going to try and pronounce the last name because I'll make a mess of it. When we send out notifications on planning applications, say on 12 Mile Road or anywhere where an Indigenous settlement is, do we notify the band chief or do we notify the members that there is an application? It falls within the reach of what we would normally give notification to. Do we reach out to the Indigenous community there? That's part one of my question.
Maybe I'll let Chris answer this because he turned his camera on.
Through you, Mayor Kutzer. In our typical practice is to be to notify any of the First Nations of applications in their respective territories. So the answer would be yes.
Okay, and second to that, obviously, we know that a great population of Indigenous peoples live within our community. Within my household, we have Cree and Ojibwe, and they're welcome to comment on any application that is circulated to them, and they do. I think there is a good understanding, but to make sure that there's notification given when there is an impact to them. Like I said, if there's a shopping mall to be built on 12 Mile Bay Road, and they should be notified about that and be able to comment on that. And we would read that, at council, and it'd be taken into consideration. Everybody who lives within the borders of this township has a right to comment on any application at any time about anything. So I think we're covered off, but I would not be opposed to Councillor Hazelton's resolution if it read such that notification be given to the First Nations community in some form or another when it is when it has some sort of impact to their area. I don't see where contacting the Moose Deer Point about a dock extension on Little Lake and Wildwood Park makes much sense. And I think we could get buried in paperwork and logistics and that. So I think we need to be very careful. As much as I'd like to see this resolution pass and there be a really good, solid communication between our Indigenous communities and the township, we need to be careful about this, and we need to be careful about how we do this. So I'm not going to oppose to this. I'm not going to support it in its current state, but I think it could be rewritten with the consultation with our planning department, our CAO, and maybe our Indigenous community, and see what they would like. Let's not ram anything down anybody's throat. Let's have a process here where we communicate first and we make decisions and bylaws later. That's my only comments.
Councillor Bocheck, I think you're going in the opposite direction, and that this resolution regards to correspondence received from First Nations. And it doesn't address correspondence to First Nations, at least in my reading. Councillor Hazelton, I saw your hand.
Yeah, I'd like to just frame the reason why I brought this resolution forward. And those of you who read the report will see that letters have come in from the First Nation. They weren't aware that they had to specifically say to mayor and council, and sadly they put my name in. I thought as well that if I forwarded on to our CAO, that it would just automatically be considered of significance enough to share with mayor and council. Sadly, I didn't do that myself, as what Councillor Wienko is recommending. I will definitely do that in the future, but I think we want to be careful that we don't hold third parties responsible for knowing how to communicate with our township. So the fact that they don't put in to mayor and council and it doesn't get on the CIP, that to me is a bit of a problem. But what I think was is important here is, you know, I've heard that we don't want to be plagued with all kinds of what I'll call trivial or irrelevant communication. I agree with that. But what I was trying to do here is alert everyone to the fact that we had significant communication come in. By the way, the entire eastern shoreline of Georgian Bay is a First Nations fishing habitat, and they have rights in all of that First Nations area. And for us to think for a second that you know, that we should ignore that or not immediately pay attention to them telling us that they have concerns about it, I think is a flaw on our part. So my point here was to try to redirect sorry, my point here was try to direct staff to revise their practice in handling First Nations correspondence. If we ignore the 2 second and that clauses, I'm sure, I would hope that everybody would easily support asking staff to revise it based on what they've heard in the discussions today. I would really like the fact that we immediately circulate inbound correspondence. That's really what the, you know, the correspondence reference is there. That we immediately direct it to all relevant parties. I don't see how that's a problem. But we can take the word all out of there and allow staff to have some discretion on that correspondence. But the correspondence that I've attached here, I don't think is the trivial, meaningless correspondence. It's probably the first time the Wisconsin First Nations has reached out to our township, and I think that to me is a significant step, and that we should be reacting to it. And certainly circulating it and responding to it. Anyways.
Ms. Schneider, do you want to add a comment? I see you've turned your camera on.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just very troubled by the comments about trivial and meaningless conversations with First Nations. It upsets me terribly that that is what our relationship building is being considered in this. And I am equally concerned that if a resolution is put forward that appears to be forced with respect to communications with First Nations, that it won't be genuine and authentic, which is what it needs to be and is when we communicate with our very close by neighbors, and also, as Councillor Bocek mentioned, residents in our community.
Thank you. I can read the resolution and we can vote on it, but I can tell you I'm very reluctant to read a resolution that won't be followed. And as Councillor Hazelton mentioned earlier, it makes no sense to have rules that aren't enforced. And so we know that all correspondence won't be forwarded and shouldn't be. And we're giving direction to staff to basically do what they're already doing. And therefore they've heard it very clearly from all of us. And I don't think there's any doubt in anyone's mind that we consider our relations with the First Nations as a high priority. And if Councillor Hazelton likes, I will willing to read the resolution, but I won't be voting for it because of some of the wording, and because I think it's redundant in that the direction has all been clearly understood by staff. Councillor Hazelton, would you like me to read the resolution?
I'd like you to read the resolution and ignore the two and that clauses.
Moved by Councillor Hazelton, seconded by Councillor Cooper. Be it resolved that Council directs staff to revise the practice of handling First Nations correspondence. All those in favor? I see 2 in favor. All those against? And that is defeated. Okay. Our final new business item is E, unique vessels on Georgian Bay waters. I don't believe we have a report on that. So is this a verbal? Ms. Wade, can you explain item E?
If memory serves me correctly, I believe this item was raised by Councillor Cooper, but he can correct me if I'm wrong. Or Councillor Wayanko. Clearly, I have a great memory today, sorry.
Yeah, well, I have found a resolution in the package you gave me of resolutions, but I'm not sure we've seen a report.
I don't always get a report with these.
Mayor Kutzer, could I
Actually-
make a comment, please?
Yes, please.
I think I was interested in making sure that we have a discussion, and I thought I'd said in my communication with Clerk Wade that it would be at Cal, but specifically to address the issue of vessels that are being converted into residences. And it wasn't just to discuss sea containers on floating docks, but also vessels that are at mooring buoys and several vessels that are being moored at single family seasonal residences. So turning them into yachting outstations. So that's the discussion I wanted to have at Cal. I think Councilor Bianco was interested in the sea container discussion. I just think if we're going to talk about sea containers on docks, we certainly should be talking about some of this other residential intensification that's taking place. So that was my objective. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that clarification. Ms. Wade.
Sorry, I would just like to clarify, we put it on council instead of Cal because we're anticipating some larger discussions tomorrow afternoon. And for a matter of timing, it was placed on today's agenda.
All right. So I guess my question is this something that's going to lead to a resolution, or is this just an opportunity for each councillor to opine that we see things happening that we're not happy about?
Could I make a comment on that, please?
Absolutely. It was a question actually directed to you.
I'd love to have a resolution developed, but I think we need to start with examining these issues and figuring out a way that we can come forth with a resolution at some point. That's why it was on Cal as opposed to council, but that's fine to happy to have sort of a freewheeling discussion here and ask and direct our staff to give consideration as to what we can do to deal with some of these issues that we're dealing with right now. So that was my objective. Thank you.
Okay, I see already Councillor Wienko followed by Councillor Bochek's hands.
Well, first of all, the container cottages on floating platforms. So I don't think we should. I think that should be full steam ahead on that issue, and I'd like to separate that from the other issues about some of the yachts that are being used for accommodations at some of the cottages and so on. So I think we should try to separate those two. To the issue of some of these liveaboard boats and so on in Georgian Bay, I think that's obviously is an important issue to the members of Georgian Bay. And I think I would like to have Christopher, when he gets his feet under the table and so on, maybe look into that to find out and maybe get some legal advice as to what authority we could have as a township over that issue. I don't know if we have that much authority if they're not tying up to docks or mainlands and so on. So I would like to get some more information about how to proceed with that issue from the planning department before we get into a lot of discussions, because I think a lot of the responsibility of that lies with the federal government and so on. So we can debate it all you want, but we may not even have authority to do any pass any regulations.
Mr. Espila, I see you.
Oh, thank you, Mayor Kutzer. Through you to the councillor. the statement is absolutely correct. The authority does lie with the federal government. There is very little that we can do unless it is actually on the land within our township. I've taken a preliminary look at this, and that's where it stands. There have been similar cases in larger cities across Canada. So there is some history to this. Our hands are really tied as to what we have authority to do with respect to this matter.
Thank you. Councillor Bocek, followed by Councillor Jarvis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Mr. Cooper for bringing this up. Councillor Cooper, I really believe both vessels that we're talking about here have great urgency. However, I don't want to muddy the waters of what's happening with these steel barges filled with styrofoam floating around with sea cans on them and a properly registered vessel with, you know, the number of people, the weight, everything else stipulated on these vessels to make them legal. And I think if we include both at the same time, it's going to muddy the waters too much that we can get anything done on these barges. I will support the writing of a resolution on this. I would like to have them separated, and I will engage myself completely on both topics, but I think they need to be separate and addressed separate. Although they have similarities, it is really two completely different things. And I think the floating sea cans need to be addressed as a separate item. And if this resolution, or if there's a resolution written here about the sea can part of it, I would certainly support it. And if there's a resolution separately written about these boats being moored at docks, being used as cottages, I would certainly support that too, but not together. We need to separate these two issues so that we can put our attention fully on what's in front of us right now before the lake freezes up.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis, followed by Councillor Cooper.
Yeah, as per our Director of Planning's comments, it is the feds that are the big stumbling block on this. And your letter, Mr. Mayor, recently basically highlights that fact. I will also comment to our Director of Planning that it seems that some municipalities have had some success in limiting, not necessarily the sea can situation, but certainly vessels that are moored to land in their communities. And there's been some, as I said, some success in working around that. I like to think that both sea cans and extraordinarily large yachts, which we're seeing more and more of on the bay, should be considered in the same sentence. But I find myself agreeing with Councillor Bocek in that there are differences. One is licensed, one is not. And that sea can situation is extremely serious for many, many different points already brought up. So yeah, I think we've got to work a little bit harder on this. We've got to do some more research on this. I'm hoping that our Director of Planning can maybe stick his head back into it again and see if he can work through the muddle that is legislation from the feds, and maybe work with the feds to try and get us some resolution, because it is unacceptable to see what is going on in Gloucester Pool, Little Lake right now, and to imagine that happening on the bay scares the crap out of me. So we've got to deal with it somehow, and the sooner the better.
Mr. Espila.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Kuchar. Just want to be setting our expectations for the township here, that what the councilor indicated. Yes, I am aware of circumstances in other provinces where the province has delegated the authority to the municipalities. I'm aware of a situation in the city of Toronto, which is under a separate piece of legislation than the rest of the municipalities in Ontario. It's all going to come down to working with the federal government and with the provincial government. So this is a big project.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor Kutzier. And I just wanted to say that I don't care whether it's 2 resolutions or 1 resolution. We need to deal with issues that have been plaguing Georgian Bay, coastal Georgian Bay for quite some time. So the sea container issue is important, but so is it important to understand what's going out on, been happening for some time on Georgian Bay. And for our new director of planning, I believe in one of our community plans, namely Cognizine, there's specific verbiage in our bylaws that deal with vessels being moored at one location over X number of days or something to that effect. So if there are bylaws that are available to us and they're actually in place, why couldn't we include those more broadly across the township? So that I think we need to look into that. And I suspect that while there's a certain regulation regarding federally and maybe provincially with respect to these floating sea containers, I think that we're also going to find with the mooring buoys, for example, that once again comes under federal. So that may be not exactly the same thing, but similar. So that's why we need to consider both matters, even if we have 2 separate resolutions. So I would ask that we have our staff come back to us with what we can and cannot do more specifically, because I do believe we already have something in place to deal with some of the issues at seasonal residences. And by the way, at some of these seasonal residences, I understand it, at the backside of Deer Island, for example, there's certain of these residences, they've actually added cabins in the woods that are a cabin related to each boat at the dock. And I don't know that there's any regulation there we can deal with if they're under 100 square feet, but they're hidden in the woods. So problematic. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Douglas.
Thank you, Mayor Coetzee. I think we have a serious problem with both. I will agree with both Councillor Cooper and Jarvis, well, with many of our councillors. And I do think that, you know, they're dealt with similarly, not quite the same, but similar, but the end result is, it is a very big problem. I would agree. And I would hope that, Christopher, you at some point are able to have the manpower available to you to look into this with the federals and the provincial government to find out how we can move forward, because it really, I mean, the sea cans floating is absolutely shocking, but we do have a very big problem with the larger vessels that are mooring. And as Councillor Cooper said, it is sort of creeping onto the land. So I think we have 2 very big problems here. I would like to see, you know, both of them handled. They may have to be handled separately because they are such large topics, but both of equal importance to, I'm sure, most of our constituents.
Thank you. Councillor Hazelton, do you want to weigh in on this round?
I find that there are synergies between a lot of the issues that we've got here, whether they be floating sea containers or whether they be vessels on the water, whether they be floating houseboats. One thing that is definitely common is that they all seem to believe that they can legally discharge gray water into the water, and yet no cottage can do that. So what we really have here is cottages that have a new designation and are legally able to discharge gray water. And of course, that's almost as vile as black water. We have a bylaw in our township that makes it illegal to discharge gray water, but we have never attempted to enforce it, probably because it is likely unenforceable. But the synergies between these 2 environments, I think, are, well, actually, there's multiple environments. There's the sea containers on flotation of some kind. There are floating cottages. There are mooring buoys that are essentially accomplishing the same thing with a different kind of vessel. And then we have these large liveaboard vessels that are moored at a dock, which I also believe we have an opportunity to enforce. In the Skidmore decision, is a legal decision that put teeth into the township bylaws. So perhaps that needs to be handed over to our bylaw enforcement department. But I think that regardless of the fact that there may be considered or known that there is federal jurisdiction or other jurisdictions involved, I think we are sticking our head in the sand if we try to take no action. We need to take action, whether it's one resolution, 2 resolutions, or 10 resolutions. We need to find some way of raising the visibility of this and including and copying other levels of government, helping them understand the magnitude of this problem. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess I have a number of reactions to this. One is I think it's totally inappropriate that any vessel, regardless of description, in our waters is allowed to discharge gray water. That should be so, I mean, we can't even have an outdoor shower hundreds of feet away from the shore. But they can have a shower that drains straight into the lake 2 feet off our dock. And I'm sorry, that is unacceptable. Totally unacceptable. I think that actually Mr. Espila hit the nail on the head when he used the term delegated authority. And I really do think that what we need to do is talk to the provincial and federal governments about delegating some of their authority to municipalities that have as much waterfront as we do. And we're not unique in the sense that there are probably dozens of municipalities across the country, if not hundreds, that have waterfront that are exposed to these same challenges that we are. And I think that we need to work actively and quickly with our other levels of government to determine what we can do as a municipality and try to persuade them to delegate some authority to other things that we maybe legally can't do now unless they delegate the authority. It's what we're after. Don't make something a federal law when the enforcement has to be done locally and you don't have the people to enforce it. So I think it's a huge issue. My question right now is, we know that staff are already working on this. I can assure you that we have numerous staff members who are quite upset about what's going on Little Lake Gloucester Pool. They're working very actively on it. And I think that maybe, I don't think we need to give them direction in the sense that they're already doing it. And so is a resolution necessary at this point, or is it actually a little premature? Because I would like them to come back to us as soon as possible with recommendations that lead to more specific resolutions. And hopefully agreements with our provincial and federal counterparts as to how we can, as I put it sometimes, plug this loophole that's big enough that you can shove a damn ugly barge thing through it. I mean, it's ridiculous. Having said that, I would like, I'm not sure we want a resolution right now, and I certainly don't want to spend the next hour trying to craft one. So would council be satisfied at this point is simply saying to staff, this is a top priority, because I've heard all councillors say it's a top priority. Ms. Gunby, do you need more than that from us at this moment?
I do not. Council has made their points clear over the last few months about these items, and it is something that we're already working on.
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor Kutzier, and I'm glad we've had this discussion. And my objective was to get something coming back to us from staff around these things. I just would like to reiterate, though, that we need to get some legal advice with respect to what we can today do at this township.
Ms. Gumby has already addressed that with one of her consultants that she mentioned earlier today.
Well, except that I'm pointing out, I think just previously that we do have some bylaws that we
Yeah.
can work with. And I think we better start looking at that and maybe figuring out a way to enforce. That's
Yeah,
all I
well,
really want.
And maybe we'll introduce 1 or 2 new bylaws if we can. Councillor Bocek.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The reason I said that I would support the resolution, a split resolution that does not involve both, is I'm very keen on working with this tracking system that we've implemented in the township. And when there's a resolution created and passed, it enters into that queue and we get to follow up on how the progress is going. Any new information would come to that queue and so council could see. And I haven't had any experience using the new tracking system yet, but my understanding is that if there's not a resolution created, there's no way of tracking it as it moves forward. I could be wrong, but I'm certainly open to anybody enlightening me on that one.
Ms. Gunby would be the enlightener in this case.
Yes, so that is true that all the resolutions passed go on that action tracker. If it's for the comfort of council to have a resolution included on there, that's up to council to vote on it. But we already have a legal opinion in the works regarding the C-bins, and I'm sure that Chris has heard your concerns about the other vessels, and he will be working on that. But if you want a resolution, feel free.
How about moved by Councillor Bocek, seconded by Councillor Cooper, be it resolved that council directs staff to make a top priority addressing the issues we have with all floating accommodations.
That gets it into the tracker queue, and that's really what I want, because I want to start using that to make sure we're keeping up with what we've promised to our constituents we're going to follow through on. So I
Okay,
would support that 100%.
all right. All those in favor? Okay, that is carried unanimously. It's on the tracker. What I'm going to propose now, everyone, is that we take a break at 12 o'clock and reconvene at 1:30. And I'm making an extra long lunch break because that will give you a chance to review the minutes that just got added this morning and look at the closed session package that just became available this morning. 1:30, we'll see how far we get, because at 2 o'clock, we're going to address item whatever the heck it was, 10A, and then go into closed. So that's for 2 o'clock. So at 1:30, we'll try to, at 1:30, we'll reconvene and we'll talk about the alternating voting methods and hopefully the consent agenda, so that at 2 o'clock, we'll go into closed session, all that. Councillor Cooper, you have a comment?
Thank you, Mayor, and I'm all for that. Just I'm looking though for an answer when we come back from either our clerk or our CAO. Is I asked to have an item added to closed session. I don't see it in the agenda. I had it in on time, and I would like to know what happened to it. Thank you.
Staff, please be prepared to respond to that this afternoon. Thank you. All right, we'll see everybody at 1:30. Thank you very much.